So excited to see this turnout. It's such an important event that the Pope has released this encyclical, and it's very exciting that we at Santa Clara are able to respond and talk about what's in it, actually, and we have the expertise to do so, especially as a Jesuit university in Silicon Valley. So what is Magnifica Humanatis? It is Pope Leo XIV's first contribution to Catholic social teaching. And this is a church teaching on society, human life, and social structures. So you will be hearing much more about what this is, about the history and where it came from both Dr. Matt Godet, as well as our panelists. So I won't say too much about that, but just to mention that it does really have a focus on AI and global societal impact. So it connects AI ethics with Catholic social teaching tradition. So why are we having this event at Santa Clara? We are having this event because we are the Jesuit University at the center of Silicon Valley technology. I actually failed to mention that I'm Kendra Sharp. I'm the Dean of Engineering here. And what I can tell you is that we have constant interaction with industry professionals, and our students are having constant interaction with industry professionals here in Silicon Valley. So this is such an important topic to be engaging with because of who we are as a Jesuit institution and where we are as a Jesuit institution in Silicon Valley with so many different tendrils of connections. We are really positioned to lead the AI ethics conversation with higher education. And arguably, the Catholic and Jesuit institutions are globally expected to engage with this encyclical. Santa Clara, for some time, has been already deeply engaged in the AI ethics discussions. Panelists Matt Godet, Brian Green, and Ann Skeet from the Markkula Center for Applied Ethics have been collaborating with the Vatican on AI for years and have been writing and publishing and presenting on these topics for a long time. So this isn't something that just showed up today, the encyclical is, but Santa Clara being engaged with these types of issues didn't just happen today. It has been happening for years. We have a couple of additional pieces of context here. Last month, we announced a gift from Deborah Sjoquist to endow the Cunningham Sjoquist Center for Applied AI and Human Potential. So we are also growing our presence. We are looking forward to being really a central convening point and pillar for AI, for the good parts of AI, the human potential, for academic and industry professionals here in the Valley and organizations. So it's a very exciting time for us right here. We said at the time that was introduced that it is the perfect time and the perfect place. And I agree. I think that continues to be true. But now we are layering on another additional element. Also, Professor Leocadi Lushumbo was selected as one of 5 official respondents to the document in Rome. She is an assistant professor at the Jesuit School of Theology. There were very few of these people that were selected, and to have that honor, to have someone from Santa Clara University and the Jesuit School of Theology to be selected is really just phenomenal. Let's see, what else shall I say? I shall introduce. We have a couple more members of the panel. So we have Julie Rubio, we have Nicholas Hayes-Mota, and Ahmed Amer. I will leave it to Matt to provide further context and introduction for you. But again, let me just say I'm so grateful to see all of you here. This is obviously an area that we're very interested in, looking at this connection between this new Magnifica Humanatis and what we're doing here at Santa Clara University. So I hope you will stay to enjoy the reception. The panel is until about 6:30, and then we do have a reception outside afterwards. And I encourage you to stay, mingle, discuss the very interesting viewpoints that I'm sure you'll hear tonight. Thank you.
Mixed up my analog pages. All right. So thank you, Dean Sharp, for that welcome and opening, and welcome to all our Santa Clara community, our faculty, staff, and especially our students here. This is a very busy time in the academic calendar, and it says a lot about the issues at stake that you all came out tonight to hear this distinguished panel. Also, welcome to the guests and any friends of Santa Clara University, whether here in the St. Clair room or on campus or off campus or watching the live stream from points off campus. We are glad to have you all join with us for this conversation. As Dean Sharp said, I am Dr. Matthew Godet. I'm the Director of Ethics Programs for the Santa Clara School of Engineering. I'm also the current chair of the General Engineering Department. And I should also note that I'm a member of the AI Research Group for the Vatican Center for Digital Culture, where I have served as the series editor for the Theological Investigations of AI book series and a lead author on 2 of their books that are currently being produced or in production. So it was a little over 1 year ago when white smoke emerged from the Sistine Chapel, indicating that the 266th successor to St. Peter had been elected. Going into the conclave, Robert Cardinal Prevost had been viewed as a dark horse candidate. He had previously served as prior general of the Augustinian Order, Bishop of Chiclayo, Peru, and in several highly ranked positions under Pope Francis. But he was an American. And that fact alone made him seem a very unlikely candidate. Conclaves are not horse races, though, and the odds are almost never correct. So when the newly dubbed Pope Leo XIV addressed the crowd in St. Peter's Square, he noted that he chose the papal name of Leo in honor of Pope Leo XIII, whose encyclical letter, Rerum Novarum, launched the tradition we now know today as Catholic social teaching in 1891. In that year, the earlier Pope Leo saw the suffering and disruption that the Industrial Revolution was causing and felt called to weigh in as a global leader to help the faithful. Again, analog problems. Help the faithful begin to think more systematically about what a modern industrialized society should look like. Leo XIII did not reject industry. Instead, Rerum Novarum offered a vision for industrialized societies that lifted up the human being, and especially the role of the worker, as being imbued with basic dignity that must be protected. He called upon the solidarity of all human persons to protect that dignity and to advance a common good. Through this document, Pope Leo XIII engaged the Catholic Church in an ongoing conversation about how our social structures should and should not function, and who they should and should not serve. His successor popes would follow his lead, penning encyclicals to join global conversations regarding the Great Depression, Cold War and nuclear deterrence, global poverty, the climate crisis, among other issues. First in 1961, but increasingly since, these letters would come to be addressed not just to the Catholic bishops or the Catholic faithful, but to all men and women of goodwill. Pope Leo XIV uses that term in his own encyclical. Pope Leo XIV has spent the past year signaling that he believes we are in a technological revolution today that is on par with the Industrial Revolution. Like his predecessor, today's Pope Leo does not reject AI, but the advent of those technologies we collectively dub artificial intelligence has already begun to disrupt our economy and society in ways that demand a global conversation about where we are going. In authoring Magnifica Humanitas, there we go, Humanitas, and symbolically signing it on the 135th anniversary of Rerum Novarum, Pope Leo XIV is aiming to fulfill on the promise made by choosing the papal name Leo, and to offer a letter that is officially Catholic teaching, grounded in Catholic faith terms about the nature of the human being and the purpose of society, but engaging the world in a conversation it needs to have about our shared future. Santa Clara University is the Jesuit University of Silicon Valley. That means that within our own university values, we lift high the principles of human dignity, human agency, protection of the poor and the vulnerable, solidarity, subsidiarity, and the global common good that are fundamental to Catholic social teaching. At the same time, as a school of engineering, and in partnership with the other schools of this university, we also believe that the power of technology to help advance these principles, we believe in the power of technology to help advance these principles and bring about the kind of society we all want to live in. So as news of this encyclical began to emerge, it seemed natural that Santa Clara should be a nexus point for the conversation Pope Leo is hoping to catalyze between the AI technologies that are emerging from this valley and the wider society that is receiving them. The panel you are about to see is our first engagement with this document. It's our first engagement. And at that nexus of the Catholic world and the technology world, it is our first response, but it will not be our last word. That letter was released yesterday at 11:30 a.m. Rome time. That's 2:30 a.m. California time. The panelists we have gathered have spent a good amount of the last 39 hours since the encyclical dropped, reading, digesting, discussing, and contemplating Pope Leo XIV's words. I am so very grateful to all of these friends and colleagues and their willingness to give up a part of their holiday weekend to focus on this topic in a tribute, or the fact that they were willing to give up their holiday weekend and focus on the topic is a tribute to the intellectual community that Santa Clara University is, and the importance of this topic and this letter for our world today. So without further ado, let me introduce you to the amazing panel of friends and colleagues that we have gathered for you tonight. Starting on your left, Julie Rubio is the Shea Huseman Professor of Christian Social Ethics at the Jesuit School of Theology of Santa Clara University, where she served as Associate Dean from 2022 to 2025. I think there was a point in there where she actually served as Acting Dean for part of that too. First female Acting Dean of the Jesuit School, as far as I know. Her research focuses on family, feminism, religion, and politics, and she is the author of 5 books, including most recently, Can You Be a Feminist? Or Can You Be a Catholic and a Feminist? Moving down the line, Nicholas Hayes-Mota is an assistant professor of social and theological ethics in the Department of Religious Studies at Santa Clara University, and a spring 2026 fellow with the Georgetown University's Initiative on Catholic Social Thought and Public Life. A scholar of Catholic social thought with 15 years of experience as a practitioner of faith-based community organizing, his research explores the ethics of democratic citizenship and the possibility of a politics of the common good. Ann Skeet is Senior Director of Leadership Ethics at the Markkula Center for Applied Ethics at Santa Clara University, where her work focuses on ethical leadership, corporate culture, and responsible technology governments. She is a member of the AI research group that I previously mentioned at the Vatican Dicastery for Culture and Education, and a co-author of Ethics in the Age of Disruptive Technologies, an Operational Roadmap. Brian Patrick Green is the Director of Technology Ethics at the Markkula Center of Applied Ethics. He also teaches AI ethics in the AI ethics and space ethics in the Graduate School of Engineering. He also has a book entitled Space Ethics. Check it out. A contributor and lead author on 3 books with the Vatican's Dicastery for Culture and Education. His work spans AI ethics, engineering ethics, and the relationship between technology and religion. And finally, Ahmed Amer is an associate professor of computer science and engineering at Santa Clara University and a faculty scholar at the Markkula Center for Applied Ethics, where his work examines the ethical issues involving data storage, processing, and management. He holds a doctorate in computer science from the University of California, Santa Cruz, and his research focuses on data storage systems and systems sustainability and resilience. Can we please give me a round of applause? We've organized tonight around simply a conversation that we've been having on campus for years, but more precisely in the last 48 hours, we've been having together And so we've organized this in a series of questions that I'm going to ask the panelists. They're going to respond. There is QR codes that you can submit questions if you have questions. There are also some pads and pens if you would like to submit a question. There'll be some folks who can collect those. Just hold it up. And if we have time at the end, we will get to as many questions as we can. It kind of depends on how much time we have, because there's also food and whatnot to have, and conversation afterwards. And so I should make the point, though, that any questions you do ask will become part of our experience of what the questions the public wants to have answered here. And we don't plan this to, like I said, we don't plan this to be the last word in this conversation. We intend, when we get back in the fall and the students come back, to be having more panels like this. And so we invite you to submit your questions now. We will, if we don't answer it today, we will try to incorporate it later on as well. So let me start with the first question for Nicholas. This is Pope Leo XIV's first social encyclical. Can you help us explain what that means? What is an encyclical, and what is Catholic social teaching?
Thank you very much. Before I begin, can everybody hear me? All right, terrific. The mics are working. So what is an encyclical? What is Catholic social teaching? Let me start a little bit with Catholic social teaching. So Catholic social teaching is the Catholic Church's official body of teaching on social, economic, and political questions, but which it approaches from a moral perspective. So everything from what makes a just economy to the ethics of war and peace to the ethics of political institutions, all part of Catholic social teaching, or CST, as those of us in the Guild call it for short. And Catholic social teaching draws on the Church's 2,000-year tradition of theology as well as its scriptures, but it's really a modern phenomenon in its current sense. So Catholic social teaching is conventionally dated to the encyclical Rerum Novarum, which Professor Gaudet mentioned earlier, issued by Leo XIII, the last pope to hold that name, in 1891. And Leo in general was a pioneer of the encyclical as a teaching document. So an encyclical is a long formal letter in which a pope develops the Church's doctrinal teaching in response to some new set of questions. And it was really Leo XIII who began using that as a regular instrument for further developing Catholic doctrine, and popes have continued to do that since. So ever since Leo issued Rerum Novarum in response to the challenges of the Industrial Revolution and really taking a stand on the dignity of work, on the responsibility of society and the government to ensure the economy works for the common good, subsequent popes have continued to develop Catholic social teaching through other encyclicals. And so there's a body of encyclicals, referred to as the social encyclicals, which is where that development happens. And these encyclicals reference each other. They reference those that came before. They're often issued on anniversaries, so it's no coincidence that Magnificat Humanitas was issued on the 135th anniversary of Rerum Novarum. That was one of the ways in which it marked itself as a social encyclical developing Catholic social teaching. And to highlight that aspect of development for a moment, it's very important to appreciate that Catholic social teaching is a dynamically evolving and changing tradition. So every time a pope issues one of these documents, they add new elements to the established body of Catholic social teaching. And sometimes they even change it in some pretty significant ways. So most famously in the 1960s, the Church changed its formal position on religious liberty being a fundamental human right that it was obligatory upon governments to respect in their civic constitutions. And that's one example, but there are others you could lift up of how CST has meaningfully changed over time as well as grown over time. And it often changes in response to developments in the world. New things happen, and those call for new responses on the Church's part, drawing on its tradition, to consider how should we think about these new challenges appearing. Today, the challenge of AI. And one of the things Magnificat Humanitas does that I'd really like to highlight is Leo explicitly calls attention to that character of Catholic social teaching as a developing, changing tradition. He even says you shouldn't associate it as sort of a textbook set of principles. It's the Church's process of shared discernment. So that it's really important to highlight. It's this continually evolving thing in which the Church learns from what's going on in the world and responds to it. And that speaks to a final piece of Catholic social teaching I'd want to highlight, which is although it's issued by the Catholic Church and by its authorities, either popes or the Second Vatican Council also, it is addressed, as Professor Gaudet said, to all people of goodwill. And although Catholic social teaching draws on specifically Catholic theological commitments, its goal is to present a moral framework that can be appealing to all people of conscience who are reasonable and well-intentioned. And so Catholic social teaching, especially since the 60s, has sought to build consensus around the body of principles it puts out across a wide variety of differences. And it's also sought to actively commit the church to working together with people across various kinds of differences to bring those principles to being in the world. And it recognizes that to do that, it's vitally important the church not simply teach, but also learn, engage in dialogue with people beyond the boundaries of the Catholic tradition. And you saw that modeled in the press conference that launched this encyclical, which one of my colleagues will say more about in a moment. But so the church's formal body of teaching on social, economic, political questions, but also a dynamic, evolving tradition that's not only for Catholics and that develops as much through learning as through teaching.
Thank you, Nicholas. Ahmed, throughout the history of Catholic social throughout its history, Catholic social teaching has tried to lift up a particular vision for what society should look like. At the same time, it's a living tradition, as Nicholas just said, emerging with each new contribution, responding to the signs of the times, as the tradition likes to call it. What is it about this moment in time that warrants a new document and a new discussion?
First, a quick sound check. Everyone can hear me okay as well?
Yes.
Excellent. So, Matt, the moment is both new and continuing. So, just like both the Pope's name and the encyclical itself points to evolution and history over time, the technological moment is perhaps best understood and its implications best discerned if we think of it that way and how we got to it as well as where we're at. So if I ask the room, do you agree that we live in a more informational world where the mechanisms and machinery that manipulate, transmit, and receive information are increasingly important? I don't think anyone here would disagree with that, but I could ask that same question about the birth of the internet, the invention of the telegraph, the printing press. We have been through moments of dramatic change in how we deal with information. But to be clear, this is a very special moment in terms of the scale, impact, and visibility of these technologies and how they affect us. And when a technology doesn't just affect how you produce fabric and how you run a factory or how you power machinery, but affects how we communicate with each other and how we perceive and absorb truth, at that point it becomes very, very urgent to address the problems, the potential of building dark satanic mills before they're actually creating the harms that we may or may not recover from. So that's what makes it a new moment. It's the scale, the visibility, and the widespread impact of the technological evolution we've reached. I should point out, it's been over 12 years since that term, infosphere and informational world and a fourth revolution, was first coined in a popular book. And it's an even older concept than that. But the sheer scale, impact, and speed is at a point where it is more urgent than ever, which makes this encyclical so timely and the reference to the past so wise.
Thank you, Ahmed. So what we're saying is this is an important moment. Brian, why does the church have anything to say about technology?
Yeah, this is a great question. One thing that I will say is that the Catholic Church has, first of all, been thinking about technology for a long time. Pope Francis was very particularly interested in AI as a topic. But if you look back at the history of the Catholic Church, you have monks who are doing all sorts of interesting things in their monasteries related to metallurgy and developing new sorts of chemicals and all sorts of things that you might not expect. They're doing, levees and flood control stuff and reservoirs, and all this kind of technology was really starting to get developed even just after the fall of the Roman Empire. There's all this really interesting technological work that's happening in monasteries. So the church has been overall interested in technology for a very long time. What I'll say about Pope Francis, though, is that Pope Francis listened. That was one of the best things that he did. And around 10 years ago, there were some executives who came to him and said, Pope Francis, we need you to pay attention to AI. AI is going to be big. There's going to be something big happening here. Just be prepared for it. And so based on that, he was prepared for it. He started thinking about, who at the Vatican should start doing various things. And he got people working on these topics. So, for example, approximately 10 years ago, a series of dialogues began where Silicon Valley executives went to Rome, had conversations with people there, sometimes met the Pope. And so these conversations developed over time. The AI research group that Anne and Matt and I are all a part of started back around 2020. But also there's been work with the Pontifical Academy of Sciences and the Rome Call for AI Ethics and all these other sorts of initiatives at the Vatican that have really been developing over time. So Pope Francis listened. All this information started getting collected and started turning into something. And then Pope Leo comes along. And I like to think of Pope Leo as he has the name Lion, right? So what is this? This is, the printout of the encyclical. This is the roar. This is the lion's roar, if you want to think about it this way. And if you drip it on the floor, it'll make a sound. I mean, this is a big document, and it takes together all this listening that has been happening up until now, and it turns it into something that goes out there into the world and then does something. People have to listen in return. And it's not that Pope Leo is not going to also listen to the world. I mean, he's very much opened up that conversation. Chris Olaf from Anthropic was there at the Vatican yesterday as one of the speakers on there. There are a lot of people upset about that, and yet Pope Leo wants to have this conversation out there in the world. There's a lot to think about in terms of what the church can say about this. I mean, there's a lot of people say, why does the church care about social stuff at all? This is, the church should be thinking about spiritual stuff. It shouldn't be thinking about what's actually going on in the world. This is a criticism that's been heard before. But the honest truth is that the church cares about people. The whole reason that, if you look at the ministry of Jesus, for example, Jesus went around healing people, like in a very physical way. Jesus went around teaching people. These are things that the Catholic Church does. The Catholic Church has universities. The Catholic Church has hospitals. The Catholic Church does things out there in the world in order to help people because we're people who need help ultimately. We need to be out there helping others and also accepting help from others. And what the Pope is trying to do in a very general way, in a very kind of top-level abstract way, is to give us the encouragement to go out there and really do something that needs to be done. With this new change in society, we need to think about what we can do as individuals to kind of participate in that. So in that way, why does the church have something to say? It's because the church wants to make sure that the world is going in a good direction and not in a bad direction, which is kind of the issue that we have laid out in front of us today.
Thanks, Brian. You always put it so simply. Just go in the good direction, not the bad direction, right? But I also appreciate you pointing that this is not necessarily a new tradition. This goes all the way back to Jesus. And the kingdom of God is like this, is so much of his teaching, is this is what it should look like. And so model yourselves after this. So I appreciate that. Thank you. And 5 people, we've alluded to this already a couple times, 5 people were invited to respond to the encyclical as part of its presentation. This was actually a new way of presenting the document. Oftentimes it drops and the response is more organic. But 5 people were specifically invited to be part of the presentation here. 2 were cardinals. Okay, that's understandable. 2 were lay female theologian professors, one of which being Jesuit School of Theology's own Leocande Lishombo. And 1 was a computer scientist and founder of the Frontier AI company Anthropic, who Brian just mentioned. Right? What can we infer from the way the announcement was made and the people who joined the panel for it?
Sure, thanks, Matt. and thank my colleagues for their comments, some of which have already touched on what I'm going to say about this. The first thing we can infer is that the Vatican is increasingly media savvy, and also that Pope Leo is an effective communicator, right? He really set the stage and invited a bunch of people to join him as a way of signaling what Nicholas and Brian have alluded to in their comments, that he's opening a dialogue, that he wants to have a conversation with us, that he wants it to be a two-way street. He's not just speaking. It is the first time a pope has appeared with the release of the encyclical. They've never shown up in person before. So he's also signaling with his presence how important it is. But he said in his own remarks that he wanted to listen first and then speak. And so it really does send that signal that the church wants to listen and to hear what people have to say. And in that, it's reflecting the church's consistent message about the importance of encounter, the relationships that we have with one another, the importance of dialogue and synodality, which is a practice that the church has been engaging in a more overt way in the last couple of years, which is really just a fancy way of saying getting together and talking about things. And so just the presentation and the invitation to these other scholars and business people sends that signal. By having a couple of cardinals there, he's giving a nod, of course, to the 2,000-year tradition of Catholic doctrine that the church is drawing upon around human dignity, and signaling that the church wants to be, as I say, in this conversation, and that the church has moral standing to be in this conversation, and has something to say about technology, as Brian has just reinforced, has always been part of its tradition. Chris Olah has been a somewhat controversial inclusion maybe in the moment. Some people might have misinterpreted that as an endorsement of a certain company or a person in that company. In reality, we don't really know how or why Mr. Olah was invited, but we do know that he extended his own invitation to the Pope for shared discernment. And the Pope, when he finally did speak last, after listening to all the other people, accepted that invitation. And it may be that Olah was invited because he's extended that invitation before. Theologians have been coming to Anthropic. Brian has been part of those conversations at the headquarters of the company. And they want to hear, they've signaled that they want to hear from faith traditions to help them with the very important work that they're doing. So this is just a continuation of that dialogue. And Olah, having invited some people into Anthropic, has now received an invitation from the Pope that he's returned in kind. And it's also true that Olah is an interpretability researcher, which is sort of a safety-coded agenda in the AI world. But it's also the part of the work that helps us to understand how the models work. And so there's a sense that you can't evaluate or govern something that you don't understand. So it's important for us to be able to get a handle on, to the degree that we can, on how these models are working and rendering their, returning their findings. And he's the guy that helps do that. So there's a demystification potentially of the technology itself, just with in his presence there. And he spoke also so eloquently to the fact that there's misaligned incentives, that the business community is, and capitalism itself sort of drives us to a set of responses to the marketplace that, influence the people that are developing the technology. And that people inside that ecosystem need to hear from the people outside that ecosystem to see things that they might be missing. So there's a certain humility in that stance that I thought was pretty powerful. And the inclusion of two women theologians and ethicists really speaks to, I think, the importance of the contribution and the leadership that women provide. That's also in the document itself, acknowledges some of the contributions of women. And I think that's important for the Catholic Church to extend and open up its arms also to women in that very important way. Anna Rollins spoke and reinforced the role of Catholic social teaching over the years, as Nicholas just shared with us. And our own Professor LeChambeau really was a representative of the global South. She helps us to realize and remember that the reach of artificial intelligence extends way beyond Silicon Valley, and in fact has impacted the workers, some vulnerable workers in the global South, in ways that are not necessarily positive. and that we need to take into account the effects that it's having in the parts of the world that are contributing to training these models, for example, and all the data labeling that was part of that process. And she also spoke to the cultures of the Global South and the fact that they honor collaboration and communal decision-making. And so she reminds us that that's part of what we need to be doing now, that we need to make sure that all the voices are represented in the discussion. So I thought it was a very thoughtful composition of the panel. I thought the sequencing of it, the Pope speaking last, doing the active listening that he suggested was so important to the process, was symbolic, and his presence really spoke to the importance of the document and his commitment to what he's offered to us.
Thank you, Anne. All right, so we've laid out the foundation of where this document came from, how it came to be, some of the presentation of it. Let's dig into some of the theology of it, and what's actually in the document. So, Julie, the encyclical's full title is On the Protection of Human Dignity in the Age of Artificial Intelligence. Protection implies something is under threat. How specifically is dignity being threatened, and what does this encyclical offer as a remedy?
Yeah, I think we could say that dignity is under threat because of technology.
You hear in the back? Oh.
Better, yes. Okay. Dignity is under threat due to technology and specifically AI, not in themselves, because they're neutral in themselves, but when they are pursued without ethics, that's the problem. So in response to this threat, what the Pope offers is not a set of rules. That's really not what's there in the encyclical, but he invites us to pause and ask a question, to ask, where are we? Where are we going? What kind of persons do we want to become, and how is AI shaping this? In particular, he worries about human dignity in relation to a lot of things, but I'll highlight war and our personal lives. With regard to war, he expresses concerns about autonomous weapons and the way in which they can mask human judgment or make it hard to trace human judgment, and therefore for humans to take responsibility for death and destruction. He worries about the power of AI in the media to put us into warring, polarized camps and reify those camps and help us come to dislike each other more and more and distrust each other. He worries about false narratives and how they fuel a false realism that war is inevitable. And underneath all of this, he sees a relational poverty. I think that's a key term for the encyclical, a relational poverty that the technocratic paradigm is shaping. And that relational poverty that makes us go to war with each other, whether in political polarization or actual war, also affects our personal lives. Here, the technocratic paradigm can make it difficult for us to accept human finitude, to value our limitations and our weaknesses, our vulnerability, because of the drive for perfection, for improvement, for efficiency. Digital technologies, as we know, can capture our attention, especially difficult for children, but for all of us, but they can make it more difficult for us to have the relationships that we are made for. And so the remedy for this, according to Pope Leo, is ethics, right? And specifically a rich understanding of the dignity of the human person, which calls magnificent, right? A human person who is embodied, made for relationship, and made for seeking truth. With that view of the human person, then we're able to discern and take responsibility. So we approach these technologies fully human and fully aware of our responsibility to judge and be responsible.
Thanks, Julie. All right, so, I mean, it sounds like the Pope's pretty anti-technology. But he's not, if you actually read the document. He approaches this, as I said in my introduction, not as a yes or no, but instead as two different paths we could possibly build, or actually the metaphor he uses are actually two different buildings we could possibly build. Are we building a Tower of Babel, or are we rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem? And so, Brian, what does he mean with this metaphor? How does he use this, and what is he trying to get at?
Yeah, I think that one way that we can look at this is, much like you said, is that we're going down this road. We can choose to either drive, are we going to go to the Tower of Babel, or are we going to go towards the city that we can rebuild and build together? And so by saying that, it's saying maybe we don't necessarily have the power to stop the technology, right? But we do have the power to steer the technology. And so we need to think about what direction we're going in. It's not about rejecting technology. It's about making sure that technology is being used for something good, ultimately. And if you want to think about the Tower of Babel is this monolithic, monotone future, if you want to think about it that way. There's one thing, the entire world has been homogenized. We all speak the same language. We all think the same things. We all are consumers, or we're all being exploited or enslaved in the same way by technology. Think of all the negative things that you can think about this and might be connected to this original Babel story where they're just very obsessed with building this one thing. It's totalitarian, if you want to think of it that way. It's this bad sort of future that we can envision. On the other hand, there's this pluralistic, polyphonic city that we can contribute to building together. Everybody has their part, and all together we build something where everyone wants to be there. It's diverse, it's pluralistic, and it's cooperative. It's not this totalitarian, monolithic thing that we get obsessed for and drive towards that one thing. Right now, technology is obsessed with AGI, right? It's everyone's talking about, it's not just artificial intelligence, it's artificial general intelligence, which is going to be as good as a human being, so that what do the rest of us do? Well, we get replaced. And what the Pope is saying is that that is not the right way. That is not the future that we're aiming for. We're not looking to replace people. We're looking to have technology help us do things that are going to make a better future together, ultimately. One in which, once again, we are cooperating, and it's not a matter of this totalitarian control that tries to homogenize us all into just one project together.
Thanks, Brian. Ahmed, historically, Catholic social teaching has placed a strong emphasis on the responsibility of those with power and expertise. That knowledge creates obligation, not just opportunity. Now, you and I, and several of the panelists up here, work with students who are building these systems. We train engineers, you and I, right? What does Magnifica Humanitas ask of a computer programmer? And is that question even on the table in how we train our students?
How we train our students. Well, honestly, being on this panel reminds me of how lucky I am to be at a Jesuit institution, which has values like caring for the whole person and formation and educating a whole engineer. If I might refer to the city, Jerusalem, city of peace, right? It's a nice thing to think of. It's a good direction to go in. I believe that the best engineers are good engineers, and good in multiple senses of that word. And one of the reasons I feel lucky to be here among my colleagues is that when it comes to the training of the engineers, it's not just on me and my colleagues within computer science and engineering, within the School of Engineering. We have such a wonderful, diverse group that can help us. Now, when I say the best engineers are good engineers, that might sound like an idealistic statement of, yeah, you want to train them to be good and responsible. That's going to fix things. Well, no. That is definitely what you should be doing, right? But that doesn't actually fix things because, forgive me for phrasing it this way, the better engineer is the one who builds the bridge that lasts, right? The better software engineer is the one who builds the software whose users are happy with and ultimately get benefit out of, not get addicted to and then rue the day they joined that platform or got that app, right? So when I say the best engineers are good engineers, I mean that also from a pragmatic and technological sense. The reason I kind of rolled my eyes when Brian mentioned AGI is on a technological and scientific level, there is so much problematic with the misuse of the term intelligence when we are talking about information automation technologies, really, and the various iterations of it that have come under the name AI, up to the point where we're at now, where it's so urgent to deal with. So, to answer your question, what does it say? We need to educate, definitely, our engineers more holistically so that they can better discern right from wrong in their practice. But I ask you, what good is that if the rest of us are not also better educated about the nature of technology and its impact on us, and our engineers are placed in environments with perverse incentives that do not allow them to be their best selves and build the best things for us? So, Matt, I would say that's what it points us to, and it reminds me how lucky I feel to be at an institution that holds those values. Within engineering, that's why you'll see we have a focus on engineering for good, and we have long-standing centers like the Markkula Center for Applied Ethics, whose very name reminds us that it's not about arguing about the ethics, it's about how you apply it. And newer centers that talk about applying AI. Because again, it's not about should we know of this tech or should it be forbidden knowledge we do not discover? It's about how we apply it to each other. Because the bottom line is, I quoted earlier the term dark satanic mills. Many of you might recognize that that's from William Blake's Jerusalem. Well, I think it's important to remember it wasn't the inventors of machinery that reduced back-breaking labor who threw people into the wheels of the Industrial Revolution. That was societal greed that did it to itself. So in the question regarding the training of engineers, more holistic training engineers, and I'm so grateful that we do train engineers and students of conscience, competence, and compassion, not just within engineering, but outside of engineering.
So I appreciate that. Along those same lines, Leo uses a second metaphor where he talks about not no to technology, but to disarm technology. And I think that's a lot of what we're trying to do through our students is to steer, to use the metaphor Brian used, but also to make technology useful not in an armament way, but instead in a utility way. And so I'm going to turn the question then theologically back to Nicholas and say, can you unpack that metaphor of disarmament for us and what that might mean for us?
Yeah. So some of us on the panel are wondering, what phrases from this encyclical will people take and run with? And I think this is one of them. Leo issues a call to disarm AI. And he was quite explicit, both in the document itself and in the press conference yesterday, that this phrase is, in his own words, dear to his heart. So he finds it very important. And he also recognizes it is likely to provoke attention. That's deliberate. He is trying to call attention by using this phrase. And it's a deliberate evocation of the nuclear arms race. Right? And as Leo points out, the Catholic Church has been very active in calling for nuclear disarmament since the 1960s, since an encyclical called Pacem in Terris, Peace on Earth. And so Leo is drawing this analogy between our present situation with AI and the nuclear arms race that characterized much of the 20th century and is in some ways still very much with us, perhaps resuming. And I think it has to do with what my two previous colleagues were talking about in this Babel Jerusalem metaphor. He's really asking us to consider which of those two roads are we on? And I appreciated Ahmed's reference to the literal meaning of Jerusalem as city of peace. Right? Jerusalem is Leo's vision of peace, which in the Catholic social tradition doesn't just mean the absence of war. It's a positive vision of peace, the tranquility of order that comes from justice and right relationship, from a well-organized society. that recognizes the dignity of all and is directed toward the good. And so Leo is asking us to consider, in what ways might the development of AI be leading us not towards peace, but towards a future of ceaseless war? And there I think it's important to recognize there are a few dimensions to this. One, of course, is how is AI technology being used, to what use is it being put? And so Julie's remark about automated weapons, for example, is one of the things Leo's concerned with. Cyber warfare as well. AI certainly makes possible new kinds of warfare and of violence. But he's also quite explicit in the encyclical, it's not enough to ask what uses is the technology being put to. We also have to ask what values are embedded in its design itself. And are those values likely conducive to a future of peace or to a future of war? That's why the formation of the people building it in the right set of values is so important. But I'd highlight a third dimension as especially important here. Leo is asking, what is the social logic that is driving the development of AI today? The nuclear arms race was an arms race because of a geopolitical struggle between the blocs of the Cold War, each of whom was pursuing more and more elevated forms, i.e. destructive forms of nuclear weapons, and also building more and more nuclear weapons to compete with the other, locked into this contest for domination. And there's nothing wrong with nuclear technology. Nuclear technology is a miracle, in a sense, right? And Leo lifts that up as a source of power, for example, although it may have its issues. We could debate those in a seminar. Nuclear technology can be extremely constructive. It unlocks new potential. But put to destructive use, it's possibly potent enough to annihilate the whole human race, right? And there was something about the social logic in which the development of nuclear technology was embedded that was driving us more and more toward that future, right? Because in the interest of pursuing domination, the powers of the Cold War were building up a stockpile of increasingly destructive weapons, not realistically asking, how is this serving our ultimate ends as a human race? Right? And so there was a deliberate move, partially successful, to walk back from that arms race, to de-escalate, to ask what values should really inform our technological development? How might this money be better spent? How might we walk back from the brink of destroying ourselves? And what structures of accountability can we create to actually make that possible? And so in calling for a disarmament of AI, Leo is saying, we're in a situation not so wholly dissimilar from that. Right? We have this rapidly escalating development of AI technology, driven geopolitically by a contest between great powers today, most notably the US and China. We also have AI firms driven by competition with each other to arrive at sort of the supreme AI technology, sometimes defined as general intelligence. Right? And so we're not really taking the time to step back and ask, one, where is this leading us? Two, what values do we actually want to drive this process? And are those values the values that will lead us to a future of peace or to a future of ceaseless conflict and possibly annihilation? And then three, what structures of accountability are we creating to ensure we don't go to that future? If we're just driven by acceleration for its own sake, ultimately in the interest of dominating our enemy or our competitor, whoever that might be, that is not a future we want to build. And yet, in many ways, that is the future we are building now. And Leo does not mince his words about that. Right? He wants to inspire us with the potential for a more hopeful use of AI, but he also wants to alarm us. And that's why he's chosen this metaphor. Right? We are in an arms race. And so the call, if we want to move toward Jerusalem, is to do precisely what I said, to step back and ask for a moment, where is this leading us? What values are informing the development of this technology? What uses is it being put to? And are we creating the structures that will actually hold us accountable to ensure it's leading us towards the future we want? And there I think it's really important to recognize what Chris Olah said yesterday. The incentives in the AI business world itself are not necessarily well aligned for this, which is why he and others are calling for, we need help from the outside to make that accountability happen. And that's where the church, I think, has a really not only powerful but prophetic role to play.
Thanks, Nicholas. I'm looking at the time, and I'm also reading through many of the questions that are coming in, and there are wonderful questions here that would engage with this conversation that we're not going to have enough time to get to. Real quick on that structure question, though, Nicholas, let me just ask one quick follow-up that was in here. Should we establish an AI policy like the EU has?
I think that's a really difficult question because you'd need to evaluate how well is the EU's policy goals aligned with the goals of Catholic social teaching. So we'd need to really get into the ethical analysis. But I would say the EU has tried to step into the role of what some in the field call a super regulator, right, to really model what the regulation of AI looks like, in a way the United States has not. And some would accuse our context of being derelict in that responsibility. At the same time, the reality is the United States is home to many of the AI companies driving this, and the EU is not. And so there's kind of a misalignment between where the regulatory innovation has been happening and where the technological innovation has been happening. And that's, I think, why Leo's call for multilateralism is so important. If we're going to solve this problem, we need to work together across various divides, including our international divides. Yeah.
I appreciate that. So the reason I ask that is simply because I think Catholic social teaching has from its beginning, has pushed back on the idea that regulation is enough, right? Regulation is a minimalist approach to ethics. It sets a floor. This is the floor through which nobody should fall. The human rights are the floor through which nobody should fall, but it doesn't set us a goal of where we actually want to go. And Catholic social teaching, at its core, is trying to create the city on the hill, the goal of where we're going to go. And so I think that leads us naturally into the next question that I have for Julie, which is, Pope Leo did give us some tangible solutions, some applied solutions, to pull the word that Ahmed raised up. One of which was this notion of an ecology of communication as part of how we respond to the AI moment. Can you tell us a little about what he meant by that?
Yeah, it was a new term. It was interesting. It's linked to this idea that truth is a social good. So the common good in Catholic social teaching means the conditions, the social conditions which make it possible for human beings to flourish. And Pope Leo has now added truth to the common good. And he's saying this is something that we all need to flourish. And in order for us to have truth as a social good, we need an ecology of communication, which really means that, as Matt was just saying, that while government regulation and policy plays a role and it's important, it's not the whole thing. It won't solve our problem. We also need to look at all the other different levels of society and what they can do. So, of course, journalism has a role to play, which is important. And crucially here, I think the Pope commends journalists for calling out the church's lack of transparency on clergy sexual abuse. So he's serious when he says, journalists, we need you. And we even the church needs you and the world needs you. But also families and schools play roles. But I think important for us, the university has a role. The university is part of the ecology of communication. And part of our role, I think, I'll speak to fellow professors, is to combat what Leo calls the culture of immediacy, which the digital world prioritizes, with a different vision of education as truth-seeking, which requires which is a long journey, right? Which requires patience and depth and time. And so in order to give our students that kind of education, to be those kinds of educators, we have to teach restraint and practice it. We have to teach our students not just to absorb facts, but to synthesize, to integrate, to really become truth seekers. We have to create an environment which makes that kind of truth seeking possible.
Thanks, Julie. I'm going to point to another question that popped up here. Someone wrote, it is ironic that 4,000 words dropped yesterday mandates the use of AI to parse through for the presentation. Are there any panelists who have not leaned on the tools for today? And I will say,
Yes.
I could probably speak for all five of them that not a single one of them picked up the document and said, let's send this through AI first, right? And instead, like Brian, printed it out and diligently highlighted and diligently, I know Nicholas went paragraph by paragraph, like analyzing every single paragraph. We literally spent the last 39 hours unpacking that because that's what we do as professors, right? And so I think this builds off of what you're saying, Julie, that like we are moving by example here to say there are proper ways to use AI. It's not that we would never use AI. I used AI to write their bios, right? I didn't use AI to write my comments, right? I wanted to write those myself. And oh, by the way, I double-checked all their bios too to make sure, and I ran them by all of them too, right? And so yes, there's time saving, there's things that we can use to save time in that, and then there's appropriate places where not. This is the work of discernment, right? Which is a word that props up through this document and through the tradition so much. And I do think this gets back to things Ahmed had said, and lots of the folks up here have said about what we're doing here. Is we're no longer just teaching to a test or teaching or trying to follow a principle or trying to follow a regulation. We're teaching how to live, right? And that is a huge part of what we do and what makes Santa Clara unique in this conversation and what we're trying to do here. And so for our final sort of structured question, I do want to bring this back to the subject or the receptors of all of that work that we do, which is the students. There are students throughout this room. We're sitting in a room full of students. When I've talked with students recently about AI, their greatest fears are how it's affecting the job market. And these are deep, felt fears. In the past few weeks, we've seen several commencement speakers. We haven't had our commencement yet. But we've seen several commencement speakers, including Eric Schmidt, get booed where they brought up AI in their commencement addresses. So, Anne, can you give us some hope that this encyclical brings for our students?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about three things. At first, I want to talk about leadership and responsibility before I get to hope. But I do think it's important to note in this document that hope is one of the arcs. It is one of the themes that comes through, and we need to feel good about that. I mean, and that is because, in part, Leo is understanding, Pope Leo, what his followers need. And there's some research that supports the reality that leaders are not successful just because of their personal style. It's not just because they can have a certain flair. It's because they can sense, well, what do my followers need right now? Are they looking for protection, for vision, for fairness, expertise, affiliation, status? Those are some of the big things that followers tend to look for. And in this moment, the business community is offering up a vision of AI that a lot of people can't relate to or don't really want. And so here comes Pope Leo, and he's offering a much more palatable vision, one that puts us, the human, at the center of it, and says we need protection. And he talks specifically about protecting employment, and that is related to this question, central, of course. But overall, he's talking about those things that support humanity and the common good over the long term. So he's able to fill that need, so to the students I say, think about that. Think about what kind of leader he is modeling for us and how you can be that leader, because then that's the second piece that's in the encyclical that he's quite clear about, which is responsibility, which is the idea that many of us are sort of already a little bit tired of AI, and we sort of want it to go away, but it's probably not going to. And we're thinking, well, somebody else is going to take care of it and realize the kind of future that we want to have with it or deal with some of these challenges. And what Pope Leo says to us so clearly in this document is, no, it's you. You have to act. You have to accept the responsibility for this. Other people are not going to necessarily come forward. And so there's agency and empowerment in that, but there's also this tremendous responsibility that we must all accept so that we are able to have it serve humanity and the common good. He also reminds us that the limitations of being human are a feature, not a bug. That the fact that we suffer, that we get sick, that we age, these are things that also allow us to have compassion, generosity, to be aware of the needs of others. Those are the true human intelligence, right? That's really what we offer that, of course, artificial intelligence can never bring to the table. And so in making that point, he's talking to transhumanists and certain audiences of the encyclical, but he's also reminding us of what our own powers are. So again, it's that message of agency and the things that only we can do. And he says not only must we disarm AI, which I think is an important phrase that the document is already getting a fair amount of attention, but we must start building to repair bonds, to restore trust, and that no one builds alone. So again, it's that communal message that we're going to have to cooperate and do this together. And I think some have already said, well, the tech bros here in Silicon Valley are not going to hear this message. And they might not initially, but we have to believe that if it comes from us, and we use our voices and our votes, for example, that we can engage the people who are, the small number of people who are making some of these significant decisions in a way that can bring about meaningful change. And Leo is now giving us this picture, this path, this metaphor of rebuilding Jerusalem instead of the Tower of Babel. And so we have some vision that we can now all activate towards. And so I would just also say that one of the things that he spoke of in this encyclical that gave me hope was building towards a civilization of love. And that it's a horizon that we must seek together, and that it will arise not from one spectacular gesture, but from many small acts of fidelity that serve as a bulwark against dehumanization. And so it's all of our many small acts that are going to bring about this change. And so I hope, if anything, you feel like you can be doing something about it in the choices that you make, about the places you do go to work, about what you do when you find yourself in the workplace. And he points to some of the mechanisms that came forward in the Industrial Revolution time, the right to organize as labor, and some of the protections that employees should have as the kinds of things we might need to return to and double down on in this time and in this age. And so I wanted to close with an observation by a writer for the Washington Post, George Weigel, who said that the Pope's faith underwrites a striking confidence in the human capacity to do better than we are doing at the present. So there is hope.
Thank you, Anne. So by way of closure to this conversation, I want to ask one more question of all of you, which is, what is the one thing you want each of the people in this room to be left with when they leave? Whatever their faith, whatever their field, what do you want them to sit with coming out of the presentation of this document and our conversation today? Julie, can you start, please?
Sure. I'm taken by the Pope's words about a loss of belief in truth. He says, when people believe that nothing is genuinely true and principles are hollow words, then this leads to intolerance and aggression, and I think it leads to a lack of ethics. And so I guess I'd want all of us to wrestle with, what can we do to restore trust and desire for truth-seeking, and how can we even see that as a way of societal building and peacemaking?
Thank you, Julie. Nicholas?
In thinking over this question, where I landed was I think the document itself confronts all of us with the question, individually and collectively. And it's, again, back to that image of the two cities. It's inviting us to an examination of conscience. Is each of us individually helping to build the civilization of love, the city of Jerusalem? Or are we rather building Babel, right? The culture of power, as Leo calls it. And inspired by what Anne said, putting a more positive spin on it perhaps, I'd rephrase the question and ask, how is each of us contributing to building that civilization of love? What honest inventory can we make about how we're contributing to that, not only through our use of technology, but more broadly in our lives and how we exercise our vocations?
Thank you. Anne?
Yeah, so first of all, I just want to point out that is my mic still on? Sorry, I should have turned it off. But I want to point out that in the presentation in the press conference yesterday, most of the speakers did offer up questions. And again, just symptomatic, I think, of the kind of exchange that they're hoping we can have now that this document is public. And so I want to borrow from one of those questions because it struck me as being unique to Silicon Valley. I mean, the question that here in Silicon Valley we, of course, have to ask. And it came from Anna Rollins, the British theologian. And it was, how do we cultivate technologies that are good news for all? And that really stays with me, and I think it's a question of the place that we're in.
All right. Thank you, Ann.
Yeah, there's so much to say about this document. I think what's going to stick with me, I think, is that the world changes and the church meets the change. There's so much happening right now so quickly with AI. I think we've heard the first roar from the lion, perhaps, but I think there are going to be more roars that are coming along. So I'm very much looking forward to that.
Thank you, Brian. And Ahmed.
Well, following Brian's optimistic note, I would point out the reaching out to the other, not just in the interreligious dialogue invitation that was in there, but as you think of the other, the question I would put out there is to ponder what it is about your humanity that you value and share in common with everyone else. And if hopefully you won't find an answer because like a horizon, it's optimistic in that you never reach it, but you keep trying.
Thank you. If I could offer mine, there's so, as Brian said, or as many have said, there's so much in this document that's rich. But the image of disarming, I want to circle back to in the final moments, because I think the image of disarming is such a human thing. It's so easy to fire back at something that's not human, to dehumanize something that you fire back at. But to disarm your enemy, to disarm someone who's threatening you, to disarm something that's threatening you, right, is to very much engage with it, is to very much embrace it, but in a way that values it and uses it and is able to lift it up. When we disarm a fellow person, right, it's not because we disregard them, but it's because we care very deeply. And so that care for one another and that care for the human that is beyond, the human that is behind the technology, I think is very much a part of the message that's here. So thank you. This brings tonight's conversation to a close. I want to extend a deep thank you to our amazing panelists. Name them once again: Julie Rubio, Nicholas Hayes-Mota, Ann Skeet, Brian Green, and Ahmed Amer. I want to thank you for sharing your insights, your time, and your deep commitment to this crucial conversation. I have a few other thank yous. I want to thank several other important people who have been working behind the scenes to make this panel happen. Krishna Koder, who's been our technical just guru for everything, and has just done every behind-the-scenes thing that we needed done, has been wonderful. Olivia Lowe and Carolyn Perez-Salgado were invaluable in helping get the word out about the event. Father Robertor from JST, Karen Peterson-Iyer from the Department of Religious Studies, and Alan Bays-Morales with the Frugal Innovation Hub were all silent, behind-the-scenes thought partners for this panel that helped bring this and crystallize this conversation that we had tonight. And of course, I can't not mention Anthony Radspieler, Santa Clara Engineering's Senior Assistant for Partnerships, who has been the operational and logistic driver for making this event happen tonight. And I'm forever grateful for his partnership on this event. Lastly, I want to thank all of you here in the St. Clair room, as well as those watching online, for joining us tonight. Pope Leo XIV challenge in Magnificat Humanitas is a call to action for all of us. As we leave here, I encourage you to take the question our panelists just shared and carry it with you. The work of ensuring technology truly serves the common good, the work of ensuring technology ensuring that technology truly serves the common good is a collective effort, and it starts with each of us. And so there are nibbles and whatnot outside. We invite conversation on all of their final thoughts. I also will raise up this question because this has been asked of me several times in the last moments, and I think it is a good conversation starter for whoever you come across in our discussion right here. But what surprised you about the document, if you had a chance to read it, or about what you've heard tonight? But thank you all for being here, and thank you to everyone who's been involved.